All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. My name is Amber McLaren. I am the enrollment coordinator here at the Institute for Educational Advancement. And just for my own purposes, who is aware of IEA? Who's familiar with who we are? Okay, great. Then we're all on the same page starting out. Thank you so much for coming in tonight. We really appreciate your being here. Again, we are here tonight with Dr. Baliotis, who is a licensed psychologist, who will be discussing co-regulation, mentalization, other tools for helping gifted children with emotional regulation. That's a long mouthful, but it's a really great workshop on what we can be doing to help our children. Again, I want to mention that I'm looking at the wrong notes. These are my live stream notes. Oh, well, my notes are missing. Anyways, she is authorized through Sing to work with children, and will be sharing her presentation with us here in person only. The notes will not be shared after the meeting, so please, if you have questions, make sure you follow up afterwards. Thank you so much, and without further ado, Dr. Baliotis. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here on a day that's raining and impeachment hearings and all kinds of things going on. So thank you. It's really nice to be here. I know the title is a mouthful. There's actually a lot more terms that I'm going to talk about, and because there are so many, I have a handout that should be on your chairs, and if not, there's a couple of more up here, so you can just ask somebody to pass them down for you. But I think they're good terms to just kind of keep in mind or that you can reference as we go along. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me that as well. So, okay, let's see if I could figure this clicker out. Not working. I'm going to just use this. So I want to start off with this picture, because this is a picture of something that a gifted child that I worked with made in the beginning of her therapy. And I thought it really just encompasses a lot. It says the insides feel it all. And what she did was she made a pouch, and then she taped it on the sides, and she stuffed it with just a whole bunch of cotton, and she crinkled up some paper, and she filled it up as much as she could. And we talked about that it represented her and what was going on inside of her. And what was interesting was that she kept stuffing more and more, and it kept breaking apart at the seams, and then she'd have to retape it to fit in all that was inside of her. And probably if you have gifted children, work with gifted children, you know gifted children are intense, right? There's a lot of intensity. Some show it externally, others hold it more internally. But in either case, there's a lot that starts off on the inside for these gifted kiddos. And our job in this case was really to both discover and reshape this internal landscape of this child. She was going through some struggles, so that these feelings would really sit in her differently. And I really want to clarify that I'm not talking about getting rid of feelings. Whenever there is intensity, probably it's going to be there for the lifetime, but how we metabolize that, how we digest that, how it sits in us is what can change, so that we can make sense of our feelings in a different way. And that's really what her and my job was to do in this case, as in really every case that I see in therapy, so that she can go a little more easily about the business of living life and growing. Okay, and so how do we do that? Well, just like with parenting, there are a whole lot of aspects to parenting, right? Not just dealing with feelings. You have to be responsible. You have to pay bills. You have to get your kids to school on time. You have to teach them morals, all kinds of things. But we worked mostly on this part of her internal landscape and helping her understand it and sort things out. And the overarching theme was our relationship. So the overarching theme today is actually relationship and the importance of relationship in helping your children, your gifted, probably intense children, grow with healthy development. Okay. And our relationship, really, the goal was to grow our relationship inside of her and the functions of our relationship inside of her so that she could be with herself in some new ways that were taking root and that she got to keep for life, really. Even when she's ended therapy, we got to keep that for life. And so I know you're not probably most of you therapists or psychologists, but parents and therapists there's some overlap there, and in the kind of role that we all hold in children's lives, in that children grow parts of us inside of them. So I might use some clinical examples here and there, some images, but it doesn't mean that it's not relevant to you if you're not a therapist. These are the exact functions, in parenting your children that are going to be useful for you to use as well. So relationships save children. They really do. Children grow from relationships. They know who they are. They come to know who they are through relationships. And so everything we're going to be talking about today comes back to relationships. And we come to understand our inside experience when others understand it. There's the relationship part. And then when they let us know that what they take in from us, what we give them to know about us, makes sense. It's different than agreeing. Okay, so you don't need to agree with what your children are feeling or saying, but it's important for children to know that whatever they're experiencing makes some kind of sense. And that's really how they come to understand their inner experience. And understanding their inner experience then allows them to be able to better regulate how they behave as well. Okay. So I want to start off with one of the terms that's on your sheet, and it's the term internalization. So just as it sounds, we take in and internalize. So children not only model us, okay, they don't only mimic or copy adult behavior, but they actually take it in and grow it as a part of themselves. So they take you in, and then they grow an internal representation of you, okay? So of you, who you are, they take that in. And they also take in the relationship between you and them and grow that on the inside. And then that serves as a kind of a template for future relationships. So, not a tall order at all, but just know that how this relationship shapes up between you and your children will end up serving as a kind of a template for how they deal with relationships down the way. Especially romantic relationships, but all kinds of relationships. Oh, and I should say, especially their relationship with themselves. Okay. So here is an image that I drew for when I was doing a talk for kids. So it's a little kid-friendly, but I think it still serves the point that I'm hoping to make here. So here's the child, where it says you, and then these are all the different, let's say, people influences in a child's life, okay? And so how these people, and I'm just going to focus on family right now because that's what we're talking about here, but how this relationship goes between you and your child is what grows inside the child and becomes part of your child's internal landscape. And what happens is that then that part of you and how you respond to your child we can say grows into like a kind of an internal parent or internal caretaker that the child then gets to have in her or his life to help take care of things that maybe when they're feeling vulnerable or really sad or really excited or whatever might be going on, where they can have an internal parent part of them to help them digest or sort out those feelings, okay? So children internalize aspects of you and the dynamics between you and them. So how you are with them and how they are with you ends up being something that they internalize. So that dynamic they internalize. And then also, and this one's important, the dynamic between you and others. Okay, so for instance, I've had a parent once say to me, you know, people, when I'm done with people, they're like gone to me. They're like, they never existed in my life. Okay, they're like dead to me. And one of the things that they brought their son in for is that their son does that. And so even though the parent isn't doing that with the child has seen this happen between the parent and other people. And that dynamic has gotten internalized. And now this is one of the things that the child is dealing with, okay? That now people are kind of like dead to them. It's like all or nothing, okay? So that dynamic. So parents with each other, like partners, you know, child that has two parents, say, but maybe, you know, if they get along, then that gets internalized as a kind of a good couple, okay? A good cooperative couple, whether they're together or not, or married or not, they can still be internalized as a good working couple, collaborative one, or they can be internalized as one where things, you know, there's chaos or there's animosity and so forth. So that gets internalized. And what I always tell parents is, you know, your children really need to get the best of you. So whether you know, get along or not, that's an adult thing, but children are going to need, in order to internalize a good functioning cooperative kind of relationship, they need to get that from you, at least as a parental couple, if not as a romantic couple. And then it becomes a part of who they are, part of their own identity, and like I said, how they function in the world. So the last picture was more of like the kid-friendly one, but now I'm going to show you just a little bit because it gets a little bit more complex. We're not always perfect as adults working or raising children, and sometimes we, you know, give our children the best of who we are, and sometimes the not so best of who we are, and it all, you know, gets in the mix, right? So, you know, we can think about if like a parent is really frustrated with a child and maybe can get kind of critical, then that also gets kind of internalized too, right? And so here's a child and I who we're drawing a picture of a child having internalized a little bit of a kind of an inside bully. Now, does that mean this parent was a bully? No, this parent was a very good parent actually, but you know, sometimes got quite dysregulated, you know, herself and himself with the parents. And so that part also got internalized. And being a really sensitive, gifted child who has a, you know, very strong moral conviction about what's right and what's wrong, took that in to mean I'm a very, very bad child. And then inside grew an inside bully. Okay, so part of our work was to grow to whatever extent hadn't been grown, but also to help the child access the good parent part, who could, here's a good one, here's the vulnerable part of the self, and then here's the bully, to stand up to the bully, and then, you know, they drew the bully like knocked down. Okay, so now the good inside part of the parent got to stand up on behalf of the vulnerable part of the child against this inside bully, and the bully got knocked down. Okay, so I don't want to speak in all or nothings. You know, certainly all we need to be are good enough parents, meaning, you know, the majority of the time, but not perfect. But we do see that this kind of internal landscape can develop kind of complexly, you know, with the good and the bad and what children take in. And I really want to emphasize, because gifted children tend to be so perceptive, so sensitive, so emotionally attuned a lot of times and intense, the internal drama, we can say, is all the more dramatic, okay? So there's the various parts of the landscape. Okay, so now we know a little bit about internalization, and I want to get into some of these other terms that I have on that sheet for you. And children learn to become emotionally regulated when their caretakers attune to them emotionally, and we'll go over all these terms, reflect their feelings back to them, and this is important, in a non-judgmental way. Okay? And then help them to think about their emotional state of mind, which we call mentalization. And I want to also just emphasize that thinking about is different than convincing or trying to get their children to think themselves out of their feelings. Okay, does that make sense? Thinking about feelings might be something like, I'm feeling this way, I wonder why. So it's being curious together about what the feelings are, why they're there, to understand them, as opposed to, why am I feeling this way? That's not the right feeling to have in this situation, and then trying to talk oneself out of it, okay? Even when we go toward the feeling and think about the feeling, actually that tends to decrease dysregulation, okay? Funny enough, we go toward it and it decreases it, okay? And then the last part here is that children become emotionally regulated when their caretakers co-regulate and contain their intense emotions. Again, we'll go over all these terms until they could do it for themselves. So when you think back to the previous picture, remember, it's like happens between parent and child, and then that dyad and relationship grows inside the child, then a child can do it for oneself on the inside as they grow. Any questions? Does that make sense? Okay. So let's start with attunement. Attunement is creating an experience really of deep connectedness and harmony within a relationship by responding in a way that resonates with the experience of another being. So if you think about an orchestra, right? Somebody plays middle C, and then everybody starts to tune around, right? Tune themselves to this middle C. And everyone has to listen very carefully to make sure that they're tuning their instrument so that it'll match in the sound. Otherwise, when they start playing, it's not going to work. And then reflective responding. First, we have to be attuned to be able to take in what it is our children are giving us. And then the next thing is that we can respond with reflective responding. So reflective responding is not about problem solving. And I know problem solving is also important. I don't mean to say it's not, but this comes before problem solving, okay? So reflective responding is really like casting back like a mirror, but sometimes it's with your body language, sometimes it's with your words, but casting back like a mirror, a message that you understand what your child is giving you to know about their experience, okay? And in our society, I know our go-to is let's get mastery over this problem. Let's figure out how to solve it. But what happens is that then we're totally bypassing what the experience is even about. So if we can think about doing this before thinking about problem solving, it really does wonders for kids. So emotional attunement really is about being in tune with another person, or being metaphorically in their skin. And I love this picture right here, because what do you notice in this picture? How does this fit attunement? Anybody notice anything about it?
It feels like the father's mirroring the actions of the kids, so it's almost replicating.
Yeah, I mean, look at their body language, right? They're both looking, they're gazing in the same way, even just kind of the angles of their heads, their arms. I mean, they're really both, it's like the father is experiencing what the child is experiencing on their skin almost, right? But he doesn't look dysregulated, and the child doesn't either, probably because, you know, the dad's helping with that in this case. And so this conveys connectedness, and it essentially is saying your needs and feelings are normal and I accept them, okay? So how do we convey attunement? We do it verbally, like with actual words. We do it with our tone of voice, okay? So listen to the difference when I say, I understand, versus if I say, I understand. Tell me what did each of those, what was the difference there? How did you feel after the first one?
It was not in an accepting sort of way.
Right.
emotion was accepted.
Not at all. I was saying the words, but the message was like not at all accepting. Did it anything else that you could hear in that?
Second one was more empathetic.
More empathetic, right? And if you notice the first one, it was almost like I was already ready to say the next thing. I understand, but let's go ahead and think about this differently, as opposed to I understand, and just settling into the feelings, or even I want to understand, okay? As opposed to I don't understand. It's I don't understand. Let me understand what's going on. I'm curious too, okay? So that's where our tone of voice and our volume of our voice can really help. Sometimes when a child's really dysregulated in my office, I might, quiet my voice a little bit. And then hopefully they'll start to match it, okay? So it kind of brings down the volume of whatever's going on. And then non-verbally, so our facial expressions, right? Touch. Now, sometimes parents ask me, but my kid doesn't want to be touched. Well, then if you're going to touch them and they don't want to be touched, then you're not attuned, right? So you have to be attuned to when does the child need touch and when don't they? And my cat is a perfect boy. My cat teaches me a lot. I mean, one of my cats. I'm going to talk about my animals a lot in here. So my cat, I mean, there are times where I can hold her and she is just so intimate and she's like completely purring and just melts into my lap and does these shows with her paws and like puts them out and like does this whole, show for me because she wants to be held and wants to be really touched. And other times, she'll just meow and just want to get away. And if I try to do that, touch her during those times, she's not going to be happy. And so I've had to learn, and she's taught me a lot about attunement. I have to be attuned to when she needs to touch and when she doesn't, and when it's going to make things better and when it's going to make things worse. Okay, so that's attunement. And this is really important. The communication really should indicate physical and emotional security, and it should really respect and protect your child's vulnerabilities. Okay, because that's, we don't want to shame or mock, and children can be really sensitive, especially really sensitive gifted kids, right? It can be really vulnerable, and so we want to protect when we are in how we are conveying that attunement. And so here's another cast of the family. This is my doggie, and look at this little attuned face, right? Now she can't talk, and maybe she cannot understand the actual words that are being said. She knows some, but she understands that feeling tone, and this is what she does. And she'll kind of cock her ears, and I take her to one of my offices, and she'll do this with patients. She really gets to the heart of it, and in that sense can be quite attuned. So this is a face that's receptive, right? I heard some people, imagine if you get this face, right? Like if your child gets a face like that from you, or a kind of a body language like that from you, that is going to make it a lot easier. Oh, and I see it right back there, and that's so sweet. That's exactly what we're talking about. Okay, so emotional attunement. Essentially, you're saying, I see you, I hear you, I understand you, whether it's with words or with just your presence, your being. You don't always have to use words even. And even if you frustrate me or I disagree. So this is not a matter of right or wrong. Attunement kind of is beyond that. It's more about just first understanding what is going on. So here's what we know. Parents who are attuned and empathize with their own experiences are able to be more attuned and to empathize with their child's experiences. What are we talking about now again? Relationship. First, a parent's relationship with themselves, just like that picture that I had with the big circle in the body, right? So parents have that too. Each of you, all people do. So the more you have that relationship with yourself, the more you can then do that, the outside, the real person you with the real person of your child, and then your child grows that on the inside too. Make sense? Okay. And so then hopefully what will happen is that the dynamic then gets passed down, just like we have the term intergenerational transmission of trauma, where trauma can get passed down, unwittingly. Most parents don't want to pass down trauma, but this is the same thing. Not only does trauma get passed down, but so do the good things, so do the yummy feelings. Those get passed down too. Hopefully, if your children have children or are nurturing children, if they're teaching children or I don't know, raising animals, whatever it might be, they can pass it down. So here's a child who wrote, well, first he was looking for some solutions to feel better. And there was a moment in a session where he got very mad about something and then apologized about it. And I just really was attuned, to his feelings about it, rather than, I think what he was expecting was for me to reprimand him. And so then he went back. I usually use like a notebook with kids where we can do some of our work together. And he went back to it, flipped back and said, very strong solution. So he added that in there because now he knew experientially what it felt like. Because I said, that was attunement. And I saw your whole body change when I understood, and you were expecting, me to be like, why are you feeling this way? What are you doing? It's not the right feeling to have, but I didn't. I just understood it. And then the volume went down. The dysregulation went down. And that's when he went back. Oh yeah, a very strong solution. So reflective capacity is really a uniquely human capacity that we have to make sense of each other. I might argue with that a little bit. I think my dog makes sense of a lot of things, but she might not be able to put it into words and do it as complexly as humans do. But we really do have the capacity to make sense of each other. So here are some kind of reflective words. Remember, reflective capacity is casting back like a mirror, okay? You're not at this point providing solutions or anything. You're just reflecting back what you think might be going on or what your child is giving you to know, maybe without words. And I do want to say, asking your child, what are you feeling, oftentimes doesn't work. Tell me what you're feeling. No, we have to be the ones to pay attention and take some educated guesses. A lot of times, some kids will tell us. Some kids really do have a strong capacity to talk about feelings. But in my experience, even with a lot of gifted kids, the feelings are so intense, but they don't know how to sort them out. So we have to kind of start to take a stab at it without saying this is how you're feeling, but saying I wonder if, or maybe it's, or I'm noticing that. So those are reflective words because we're just casting back like, I'm seeing, and even if you don't know what the feeling is, you might say something like, I'm seeing a big face, or I'm seeing tears come down your face. Now, those are some pretty concrete observations, okay? And then from there, and I wonder if what you're feeling is sad or whatever it might be. So here are some examples. I can imagine how hard it is for you to follow a rule that doesn't make sense to you. Okay. How many times have I heard parents say that kids don't want to write out their math in the way that their teacher asks them to write it out with this core curriculum? And they think, why should I? I get it. I don't want to do the extra 5 steps that it takes. Well, to say, well, you have to do it. Okay, maybe they do have to do it, and they might have to make that choice if they want to get the grade that they want. But before we get there, we first need to understand that for them, they don't really want to do that because they already know how to do it, right? So I can understand how hard it is to follow a rule that doesn't make sense to you. I wonder, okay, so here I'm not like forcing words, but I wonder if you felt really scared and bad about yourself when you had a meltdown. Okay. So how many parents worry if their child has a meltdown? Is my child's falling apart, it's going to affect them socially, it's going to do all these kind of things. And we worry, we worry when a child does that. But if we can think about how it actually feels to the child, even though they're misbehaving perhaps, right? Like throwing a tantrum or on a basketball court and just, throwing the ball and saying, I'm off this team, right? But if we can just go back and revisit it and talk about how bad they might have felt about themselves when they were scared, that's a reflective statement. You must have felt sad when you were rejected, and rejected when you weren't picked on a team. And I really get that you want, here's a common one, I really get that you want to keep playing that video game and you're mad at me right now. Okay, we are going to have to put it away, but I get it. Like, I get what it's like to really be into something and then to not want to stop it. And I get that you're mad, even mad at me right now. And I can handle that. You can't throw something at me, but I can handle if you're mad about it. Okay. Sometimes there are no words for kids at all. And so here's a little child that I, not so little, I guess, 7-year-old girl that I worked with. And boy, she really didn't have the words, but I said, show me. And this is what she drew. And then we got to go back and I said to her, well, tell me the colors. Maybe we should pick the colors first. Which are the colors of what you're feeling? Because there really were no words. And then she started doing it. And then I was really quiet just with her, like, yeah. That's all I was saying. I wasn't really saying much of anything because she was still trying to sort out, but I was with her. I was attuned, just kind of giving her a little bit of a, yeah, I know. Oh gosh. Lots of colors, okay? And then she was able to say to me, oh, the blue part, this was a child who had gotten a bad grade at school, gotten in a fight with one of her friends, and then was told she was going to be ending therapy soon. So the blue is for ending therapy. That's the biggest one. And then the red was something else, and then the black was something in specific about, I think it might have been about not seeing my dog again or something like that. But first she had to sort it out that way. And then, that's a pretty messy picture. And so part of our work and my work really was to pull apart the threads and maybe give her some words for it. I bet today felt like a big shock when we said we were going to have to be ending soon. Big messy feelings. Now another one. Oh, and a big fight with your friends. Oh, and I know you love her so much. Okay, I wasn't problem solving at this point. And by the end of the session, it opened things up and she was able to say a little bit more about it. Okay, and then here's another one. Another picture, another day. It says so much, right? And by the end was able to say, my mind is exploding, but first got it this way. And so the attunement and that reflective capacity was really necessary, for me to just sit with her, slow it down and not have to problem solve. Well, what about if you tell your friend this? We're still going to have 7 more sessions, or, it really wasn't about that at that moment. At the moment, it was really about just untangling the messiness of the feelings. So when your kids give you something like this or like this, what gets evoked in you? I know they may not show you a picture like this, but I'm sure you've had these experiences, right? Where there's just this, you could feel what this looks like coming from your child, right? And so what happens to you if you think about it?
Want to problem solve for them.
You want to problem solve for it. Boy, that is just one of the most common things. I really can appreciate your honesty about that. We want to just fix it, right? This is a culture of mastery. It's a problem, let's fix it. Yeah. Anything else? What happens to you on the inside?
Kind of internalized. Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me just get you and then we'll come back to you.
I feel frustrated because I can't figure out what's wrong and I don't know what's going on.
So maybe you start to feel this too in your own inside bubble, right? Like your inside circle.
Yeah.
I have a feeling maybe this is because then you don't know, right? She didn't know at this point. So she was giving me to know what she didn't know, and your child's giving you to know what they don't know, but then you don't know, right? So then this is kind of what starts to happen inside of parents too. And what did you want to say?
Just to piggyback on that, I kind of wonder how I fit in and how I might have contributed to this state right here and what I've kind of done to get to this point.
Okay, great. So that's making me think about co-regulation, which we're going to get into in a few slides. So that's a really important point too. So, okay, so let's see here. We did that. So let's talk for a moment about containment and holding. Okay. So To contain or to hold, I mean emotionally hold. Obviously, we know what holding means, right? But to emotionally hold is it's to hold what belongs to the emotional self within, rather than letting it spill outside of the self. Okay, so when you were talking about your own frustration, you know, like I don't know what to do, a lot of times what ends up happening is that then parents become uncontained too, right? So here's contained. It's my best attempt at showing a container with some messy stuff in it. And then here's uncontained, okay? Spilling all over the place, okay? So as parents, you get to have the task of not only containing your own feelings, but containing your children's feelings too, until again, they can internalize that and then be able to do it themselves on the inside. And what I often see when parents start to work in this way is that then they start reporting to me, yeah, my children are still intense, but the recovery is much faster. They have less episodes of this kind of either explosion or implosion of feelings. And so the recovery is better, it's less frequent. And a lot of times it can also be less intense, although not always with gifted kids about the intensity. Okay, so, you know, a kind of an uncontained statement might be something like, I don't understand, what are you feeling? You know, I just tell me and then we can deal with it. Okay, that's uncontained because it's really like your own stuff that starts to get like fired up inside because you're not sure and it's just confused. You're now confused. And so it just starts to kind of spill over, as opposed to something like, boy, there's some really big feelings and we don't know what they are. We don't know. And I bet it feels bad inside of you and also bad inside of me because I want to help you. And we're going to sort this out together. Okay. Notice that I'm not lying about my feelings. I'm not trying to get the child out of the feelings. I don't even know what the feelings are. I'm just saying I don't know what they are, but I'm saying it in a way that's contained. Okay. So now we have a starting place. I had I'll give an example of a girl I was seeing. I want to say maybe she's about 11. And, you know, normally quite well functioning, but would get dysregulated. And so one time I went into the waiting room and she was on the floor under a chair in the waiting room, like kicking and crying uncontrollably. And her parent was just leaving and kind of waved at me through the window going, I don't know what to do. So I went out there and I got on the floor because she was on the floor. And so if I'm sitting up here going, what's wrong? Well, that's not going to work, right? So I had to get on the floor. So here I am on the floor with her and not saying much, just I really see you're upset. You are so upset right now. I see it because you're kicking and you're crying and you're screaming. After a couple minutes, this girl was able to contain herself because I was contained in that case. Now, yeah, did some of my anxiety come up? Well, sure, a little bit because I want to fix it myself, but I knew that wasn't going to happen because I had no way of knowing. I mean, I wasn't even involved in it, right? So the parent left before I even, you know, got to see what happened. So obviously I had no idea what was going on, but I did know some things. I knew she was on the floor. I knew she was kicking and screaming. I knew she was sobbing, and I knew she was really, really upset. Okay, so those were the things I could reflect back to her, cast it back. I also cast back just by getting on the floor because now I wasn't kicking and screaming myself, but I did get on the floor so that I can hopefully bring her, you know, sort of come to her level so we can now meet somewhere. Okay, and it was in that relationship piece that she was unable to, because ultimately I didn't find out what happened until the very end of the session. Okay, so it didn't even matter, honestly. It mattered like this much what happened, but what mattered more was how she and I dealt with it in our relationship. And that's the part that she started to grow on the inside. It was less about the actual thing she was upset about. She was upset about something with her parent, and, you know, those things are going to come and go. I mean, you know, she was upset, but the part that was really important was how the dyad between us dealt with it, and how I held those feelings for her without trying to get rid of them and without imposing and trying to fix them in the moment. Here's a child who has lots of ripped string and ripped paper and all these things that would come in, and my office looked like, you know, a tornado hit through it. And then at the end, we put it all back together, tuck it in this box, right? So now the box is the container. I was the container, but now the box is a container too, with all the messy things, right? So these kids are showing us, okay? They show me, and I want to share it with you, because whether your kids are showing you in this way or not, they do show us in some way. And these kids that, you know, I picked these particular images because they're showing us something about the kid experience, about the gifted kid experience, because I'm working with mostly with gifted kids. So, and here's another image, you know, a safe container for all of the feelings. Okay, so here's the house that's like the holding, containing environment. And so there's a room here we came up with for the safe, happy, feeling good kind of feelings, and then a safe place for the unsafe, dangerous feelings. And then there's the sticking out the tongue, right? I don't know if you could see it, but there's a little image there, the sticking out the tongue feeling, all the things that feel so unacceptable. But we got to make room for them because they are telling us something important. Here's another image, right, where here's the therapist's hands, and then there's all the messy feelings in between, and I'm holding the feelings. And sometimes I will even say this to a child: I know that you're afraid of your feelings, but I mean, if I think they are afraid, you know, I wouldn't impose this on someone that's not true for, but I know you're afraid of your feelings, but I'm not afraid of your feelings, okay? In other words, like, I've got the bottom of this, and I'm not pulling my hands apart so that, you know, you fall to the ground. I've got the bottom here. I'm not afraid of your feelings, and I will hold them until you grow a way to hold them yourself. And that's something I would recommend you can say to your kids too. I'll hold them, or I'll hold them with you until you hold them yourself. And I go back to the picture, right, with the internalization. What happens between me and a child, or you and your children, gets internalized, and now they can do it for themselves. Okay, they can then hold their own feelings. So here's, I mean, this is me and a child, but you know, it's in like an actual parent-child relationship, and this is what strengthens day in, day out, with its ups and downs, but it, you know, generally can be a strengthening relationship. And then here's what grows on the inside. So here's the inside me, meaning the child, the inside child me connection, or dyad. For you would be inside you, parent-child, right? And then what grows on the inside, so that the child grows that part of you and gets to keep that forever. And believe me, children do, the best and the worst, because I also work with adults, and sometimes adults will say to me, I don't understand why, I mean, that sounds just like my mother, and my mother's been dead for 10 years. Well, guess what? That's because we have this beautiful thing called internalization, which means your mother can be dead, but she's still living inside of you, or a representation of hers living inside of you. And so now you've got that to contend with the best and the worst of, because you've got it now for life, and you can shape it, or, you know, mold it or whatever, but you don't need the outside person anymore to do it, you know, even if a parent is gone in adulthood. So that's how we know how real these things are, because I hear it all the time from adult patients. Okay, so co-regulation, and this kind of goes back to what you were talking about. What do you know, contribute in that case? So let me just see where we are here. I just want to bring us back to the idea that emotional regulation really starts off as a two-person job. Okay, so within a dyad, each person's emotions are constantly shifting depending on the emotions or behaviors of a partner. Okay, so here's your child and you, and then you're informing each other back and forth. Okay, and I have another image in a moment, but when emotional co-regulation is occurring, emotional distress decreases and emotional stability increases. And here's a child that put it so perfectly about him and his mother. If she's not okay, I'm not okay. because I know that I will not be okay if she is not okay. Okay, it's right there. She's not okay, I'm not okay. Okay, and if I'm not okay, I guess we can say it's the same thing. You know, is she going to be okay? If I'm not okay, will she be able to hold me? Will she be able to contain me? Or am I going to get back what it is that I'm feeling, but from her or from him, you know, dad? So here's a good image to show this. Here's a child with some messy feelings, and the green is a parent. Okay, I don't know if you could see it, but you know, it's just kind of like daily life, little waves. But now the child stuff comes right into the parent, okay? Now the parent's housing it. A little bit like when you're like, oh no, what do I do with this, right? I don't know what's going on. So notice what happens next. Not only is the child stuff in the parent, but now the parent's getting dysregulated. Now the green's getting messy, right? Then, this is containment and co-regulation gone wrong, okay? So parent then gives it to the child. Now look, it's even, you know, going to be messier because now look what's happening in the child. They're both a mess now, right? And so this goes back and forth, and now that's being a little blocked by this, the camera picture here, but you'll see it's like it goes bi-directional, back and forth, and it just escalates and escalates. Here is containment at work. The child gives something to parents, take it in, but then they start to unravel it, okay? Remember when I showed you that picture, that the messy one that kid drew, right? And then I had to kind of pull apart like the threads and start to organize what are these feelings. And then, so then the parent starts to organize it and organizes it some more, and then gives that back to the child while the parent stays fairly regulated the whole time. If you look at the green, it's, you know, fairly regulated. And now the parent is regulating the child, and so the child calms down, which also regulates the parent, which then regulates the child more, and back and forth it goes. Okay. I just have just a couple more slides. I just want to talk for a moment here about our last concept, which is mentalization. And it's the ability to think about and make sense of one's own or another's thought process, emotions, and behaviors, okay? So yet again, another tall task for parents is that you've got to do it for yourself and then do it for your children until they can grow that capacity to do it themselves. And a mentalizing parental mind really can help children organize their own minds. And I want to read something that's from the book Peter Pan, because it really speaks to this. Mrs. Darling first heard of Peter when she was tidying up her children's minds. It is the nightly custom of every good mother, after her children are asleep, to rummage in their minds and put things straight for the next morning. Think about the images I've shown you, right? Repacking into their proper places the many articles that have wandered during the day. If you could keep awake, but of course you can't, you would see your mother doing this and you would find it very interesting to watch her. It's quite like tidying up drawers. You would see her on her knees, I expect, lingering humorously over some of your contents, wondering where on earth you had picked this thing up, making discoveries sweet and not so sweet, pressing this to her cheek as if it were as nice as a kitten, and hurriedly stowing that out of sight. When you wake in the morning, the naughtiness and evil passions with which you went to bed have been folded up small and placed at the bottom of your mind, and on the top, beautifully aired, are spread out your prettier thoughts ready for you to put on. Okay. This is a beautiful little passage that really gets to the heart of what we've been talking about here today. Do you want me, I have, I think, 3 or 4 more slides. Do you want me to go through them or end? We have
8 minutes.
Okay.
Go through them.
Okay, so this is another image that I made that really kind of speaks to a lot of, you know, what we've been talking about and the importance of a mentalizing mind. Okay, so here's a girl, she's kind of going through life. Okay, there's little ups and there's little dips, and then there's like a big fall. Okay, I could have drawn this in another way too, where I made a big explosion of a mountain. Okay, but in this case I did this, and so she's falling down and she's down here crying. Okay, now when she's down here, and imagine this is deep, okay? Do you think that she could, from down here, from this vantage point, see what's here? When she's down there and looking up like this in this deep ditch, do you think she can see? No. She cannot see what's here. Nor can she see that down the line, she's gonna find her way out of this and be fine, okay? So here's nothing will ever be good again. This is a state of mind, meaning a time, a set of feelings that are occurring at a specific given time, okay, a little time frame. And she cannot see that down the line, it's gonna be like, what upset? Life is good. And how many of you have had that experience with your children or even yourselves, right? You're like, wait, what just happened here? Now you're fine? Yeah, right? Okay, but here's a mentalizing mind. This is the part of the self, or first of the parent, that could stay up here and could, from that perspective, and I wish the paper was bigger so it'd be higher and you could really see the whole scope of this whole progression, right? And then imagine if this progression kept going over and over again throughout life, right? But you're up on top watching it. And that means you can see that you're not, so the part that's up here is not gonna be just lost down here or just here, but might down the line be able to say, oh, yeah, when you're here, it feels so real and so forever that I really see how upsetting it is. And then I'm thinking about later when you snuggled up in bed with me or wanted to play cards or we went out for an ice cream, and then this seems so far away, right? And so now you're here, and this is the kind of thing that parents can mentalize or help their children think about their process until children could do it themselves. I have kids now, we've used this picture, who are like, oh yeah, you know, my big thought, you know, we'll call it like my big T. My big T was sitting up here, and then like I lost him. I couldn't find my big T. And so then all I could see was this, and all I could see was this. And then they start to grow this big thought part of them that could mentalize and think about the feelings and their process. And guess what happens in that case? Then it's no longer as scary. And it doesn't mean that this doesn't feel bad, because it still feels bad when they're in this place. But there is some part of the mind that could be in that experience, but another part of the mind that could say, okay, I'm feeling like this right now, but I, from up here, know that I'm only in a ditch right now, and I'm not going to be here forever. And I would recommend not in the height of when this is happening, but later, when there is a moment where there is an openness and a calmness, where you might even be able to draw out something like this, you know, with a child, or say it with words, or whatever's gonna, you know, work with your child, but where you can really use your own mentalizing mind to help them grow their mentalizing mind. So from up here, I can see everything. Okay. So just in these last couple of slides, I want to go back to the importance of relationship, because that's really at the heart of what we've been talking about. And we, as well as our children, you know, we really do need someone to know us and to really understand our mind so that we can understand it and know it ourselves. And I want to read you one more quote here. This is by Waddell. If someone has had the experience of an external, observing and containing mind, available to discriminate between which part of the self may be in charge at any one time, like right here, oh, the little ditch, right? That part one was in charge, and then later a different part of the self was in charge. But if someone could look at all of that and discriminate which part of the self may be in charge at any one time, that person will derive from the experience of measure of some similar holding function, one that can then enable the different parts of the self to be in touch with one another. For if the various mental states are felt to be received, held, and somewhat understood, remember I said all you have to do is be good enough parents. You don't have to be perfect parents, but if you could somewhat understand it, then the intense feelings, whether of rage, fear, anxiety, jealousy, or passion, can increasingly be recognized for what they are, They can be known about and assimilated into the personality. Okay. And I do want to say this kind of parenting takes time. You're not going to do it once or twice or 20 times and have it, you know, like change everything. It's a way really of being. And here's a child who wrote a phrase that, you know, we often use in therapy is we repeat and rework. We repeat and rework. We do it over and over. And I really like this image, you know, of like a cone, where it's like we often, the same kind of scenario comes up over and over again, but it's not the broken record if we do this right. Every time we hone in a little closer to what it is that we're trying to get at and understand, and that we're trying to help our child understand about themselves too. And at the same time, while it is a lot of work, you know, the payoff is profound. And this is what a child wrote when they noticed that part of themselves on the cloud. They caught it, they noticed it, and they saw, oh my gosh, this part of me is growing. It's like real. And this child said, progress must be recognized, then proven, and then marveled at. Not my words, gifted child's words. So that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
I found my notes, so I just wanted to make another little correction here. So you were certified through SING, correct?
Yes.
To work with gifted children, and then certified with reflective parenting training through the Center for Reflective Parenting. So again, that's SING for gifted children and Center for Reflective Parenting as well. So there are more resources beyond this. Thank you again so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Online audience, thank you so much for joining us.